several more ingredients to add to our pot that we're cooking up in our exploration of the inward and the outward. The first is that story about the scavenger, and one of her menial tasks was to empty the night soil from the queen's chamber. But one day she was so ill, she was unable to undertake this task, so she sent her husband, the scavenger, to do so for her. But just as he was about to empty the container, the queen came to relieve herself, and just as he looked up, he caught a glimpse of her thigh, shining nacre, a glowing pearl, alabaster. He was smitten. From that moment on, all that possessed him was imagining the body that was attached to this piece of flesh. Distracted as he was, his wife noticed and badgered him as to what it was that was troubling him, and he admitted to her that he was smitten with the queen. Well, of course, she laughed at him and said, "You stupid fellow, if it had been some other woman, there might have been a possibility, but the queen, after all, the queen." But it just became worse and worse. He became so distracted that he forgot to bathe himself. He even forgot to eat on occasion. And it came to that state that he just had to leave the house, and he staggered down the road and sat down under a tree. But the townspeople began to notice him and thought that some sage, some saint had come to their village to take up residence, and they began to come and leave food for him and such like, but he didn't take any notice of it, and for this the people even revered him more. What a saint he was. And of course, as the crowd grew and the word got around, it came to the ears of those in the palace and the queen herself. So with an entourage she came and she knelt down in front of him and touched his feet, but he didn't even notice, he didn't even know who she was. So of course, the end of this story is that the intensity of his desire brought him to desirelessness. The other story is about that landowner who owned a vast tract of land, various paddocks of different sizes. But he was a miser. He was so mean and so unkind to those who came to work for him that no one would work for him. So his fields lay fallow, overgrown with weeds, and he did not know what to do. But it so happened that one day a holy man came along, and although he was a very miserly fellow, he still had a vestige of reverence for those who he considered to be saintly, So he invited the sage into his house and gave him due hospitality. So the sage noticed the state of his house and his environs and asked him what troubled him, and of course the old miser replied according to his awareness at that time. Well, the sage said to him, well, you know, I can give you a mantra that if you apply diligently will enable you to call forth that which will be able to undertake these tasks for you. Oh, please, please, said the old miser, I'll do whatever it is that you advise me to do. So the old wandering saint gave the miser a mantra to repeat, which he did diligently day and night. And after a certain time, all of a sudden, there appeared before the miser a great monstrosity, almost demonic in its appearance, quite frightening in fact. But this monstrosity, in a booming voice, said, you have evoked me and I will fulfill any of your demands. Just tell me what it is that you want me to do. But remember that you have to keep me occupied. Otherwise I will fulfill my nature and consume you. So of course the old miser was delighted. He had a whole list of things that would occupy this demon. So first of all, of course, he sent him out into the field to weed and so forth. And he thought, now there's such a vast tract of land that's going to take him a while, so I'll just relax now, knowing that it's all going to be done. But it seemed like almost in the blink of the eye that the demon was back and said, it's done, what do you want me to do next? And so it went on. And it seemed that the demon got faster and faster at doing these tasks, and the poor miser was rather hell-bent on keeping up with what it was, even though there were lots to do, like fill the ditches and plant the seeds and so on, mend the fences, and so on, and so on, and so on. But the miser didn't get any sleep because the demon would come and wake me up. What now? What now? What do you want me to do now? So this went on until there was less and less that the miser could think of him to do. He was getting quite exhausted keeping up with all these demands and requests and so forth, so sleepless and getting more and more exhausted. But of course realizing that, the demon meant what it was said, that if you don't keep me busy, I'm going to consume you and do away with you. So the fear grew quite rapidly in the old miser as he got more and more desperate, thinking of what he could give this demon to do. But eventually he could think of nothing, and he was rather frozen with fear. What could he do now? What more could he ask this monstrosity to do? But in the little bit of breath that he had left in him, he said to the demon, ask my wife. And so at that very moment, the wife came forth holding in her hand one of the long threads of curly hair that she had on her head. And she handed it to the demon, and she said, "Straighten this curl." Well, with great deftness and dexterity, you might say, the demon took off this hair and sat under a peepal tree and attempted to straighten the lock of hair. But it didn't happen. So the monster got quite desperate, and being a clever monster, he knew that if you took a piece of curly wire to a forge and beat it with a hammer, that it would flatten out. So he took the hair and took it to the forge and took up his hammer and tried to beat the hair flat, but of course the forge was full of fire, as was needed to flatten a piece of metal. So as soon as the hammer touched the lock of hair, it sizzled and went up in flames. The demon was so terrified of going back to the wife that it flew off, never to be seen again. Ingredients in our pot, in our endeavor to explore the inward and the outward. But like all ingredients in a cooking pot, they have to be cooked. What are the representations in these stories? Even the forge, the hammer, and the fire. Every element, every symbol, every character, in every story has meaning. What arises for us? Because always in a cooking pot, there's an aroma that comes, a whiff of what it is that's possible, that this is that's being created. Can you yet get a smell, or even a slight taste of what it is that comes when the inward and the outward and all the ingredients that constitute the psyche and existence come together? Have you yet got a sight aroma of what this is, or even grasped it and claimed it for yourself? What is it that is wrought when we bring the dimensions of existence, the movement of life, the inward and the outward, brought together, connected, to bring a state of being. State of being.